Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Here we are, ending the pandemic and entering a new era of prosperity and peace. Well, that's what President Trump is promising the American people, even as coronavirus cases are on the rise in more than half the country.
That's right. The virus has killed more than 200,000 Americans, and now we're on the cusp of what could be a second wave made worse because of flu season. Charlene Aaron reports.
As America passes the grim milestone of 200,000 lost to the coronavirus, hospitalizations and deaths are down overall. However, new infections in many states are starting to trend back upward, fueling fears the colder weather and upcoming flu season could spark another surge. Tuesday, President Trump defending his administration's handling of the pandemic.
And it's a terrible thing, but had we not closed our country down and reopened, and now we're doing well in reopening, the stock market's up, all of those things, but I think it's a horrible thing. But if we had not done it right, you could have 2 million, 2.5 million, or 3 million. But it's a horrible thing.
Vice President Joe Biden taking aim at his response in this campaign ad.
President Trump wants to write off those we lost as nobodies. This president's trying to erase the reality we're living today because he thinks it helps him politically.
In a recorded speech to a virtual UN General Assembly, the president laid the blame squarely on China. He accused China and the World Health Organization of spreading misinformation about the virus's transmission.
We must hold accountable the nation which unleashed this plague onto the world, China. The United Nations must hold China accountable for their actions.
The president also promising that America will take the lead in conquering the virus.
We will distribute a vaccine. We will defeat the virus. We will end the pandemic. And we will enter a new era of unprecedented prosperity, cooperation, and peace.
But with the flu season approaching, cases are on the rise. 18 states are in the so-called red zone, meaning infections are spreading rapidly. Citing concerns of a second wave combined with the flu season, Dr. Fauci warning people to take precautions by wearing masks and avoiding crowds.
It's unacceptable to not realize that we are entering into a risk period, and we've got to act accordingly as we enter into that risk period.
And while Dr. Fauci is cautiously optimistic about a vaccine, the Food and Drug Administration is set to issue tougher restrictions. CBN News medical reporter Lori Johnson says part of the reason is because people are afraid to get the vaccine.
So they say that later this week they're going to increase the standards. They're going to say that for as far as phase 3 trials, that a person in a phase 3 trial needs to be in it for 2 months. They want to see at least 5 severe cases of COVID in some of these test areas, because remember that some people get the vaccine and some people get a placebo, and they want to see if these people who get a placebo get very serious cases of COVID, even elderly people. That will show whether it works.
Those new rules making it unlikely a vaccine will be ready by Election Day. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Well, let's get some perspective on this. You don't want any part of this disease. Everyone that I've talked to that's had it has said it's the worst thing. And the pain associated with it, the difficulty in breathing, the fear, are you going to make it through? You really don't want this. And so please continue to do what we've all been taught to do in terms of social isolation, wearing masks in any kind of public environment, and make sure you wash your hands on a regular basis. Let's get some perspective. Go back to March, and the CDC report talked about waves of contagion. And so if we're going to be looking at flu season coming up, is there another wave of contagion heading our way because we have the false sense that we can reopen? Please continue to do the things that we've been doing as a culture, the world's been doing since this pandemic first happened. We've got to contain it, and please do whatever you can to make sure you don't get it. There's another thing, and that's the perspective here, and 200,000 deaths are just completely horrible. But compared to flu season last year was over 30,000 deaths. Flu season the year before was in the 60,000. So we're significantly higher, and the year is not out. So realize that's we're all facing. And if flu plus COVID, that's something brand new. And how do we deal with that as a culture? So please take what is necessary to protect yourself and make sure you don't get this disease. Well, in other news, there's increasing talk from Democrats about retaliation over President Trump and the Senate moving to replace Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington.
That's right, Gordon. While President Trump is set to announce his nominee Saturday, GOP senators are making plans for quick confirmation after Mitt Romney agreed not to oppose a vote before the elections.
If a nominee actually reaches the floor, then I will vote.
Now I'm happy. Thank you, Mitt. Thank you.
Reportedly topping the list is 7th Circuit Court Judge Amy Coney Barrett. The president met with her earlier this week, and he's also scheduled to meet with 11th Circuit Judge Barbara Lagoa later this week. Meanwhile, Democrats are threatening to pack the court if they win the Senate and the White House in November. On CBN's Faith Nation program, chief political analyst David Brody said Joe Biden might reluctantly go along. Is that something you think Joe Biden would ever resort to?
Well, Joe Biden from 1974 or so to 2018, the answer would have been no. The Joe Biden of 2020, all bets are off. Nowadays, look, if McConnell does this, which is expected that they're going to put this Supreme Court nomination through quickly, I think all bets are off. He'll be under considerable pressure if he becomes president of the United States to back court packing. And my guess is in the political climate we're in, he'll probably do it.
Meanwhile, the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg lies in repose in the Supreme Court today and tomorrow. On Friday, she'll lie in state at the U.S. Capitol. Well, the Justice Department made a major bust this week, arresting 179 people and seizing $6.5 million in an operation targeting illegal opioid sales on the web's so-called darknet.
Hiding behind anonymizing software known as Tor, a new sort of drug kingpin now is able to reach more buyers than ever before. These darknet marketplaces have grown in popularity at an alarming rate and allow drug traffickers to openly advertise and take orders from anywhere in the world.
The FBI and DEA, together with international partners, announced the results of Operation Disruptor, aimed at impeding opioid trafficking. The task force has taken down a number of operations selling drugs, including the powerful and often deadly painkiller fentanyl. Well, world leaders addressed the United Nations annual meeting in New York Tuesday. The event was mostly virtual, with just a few diplomats appearing in person. President Trump and others spoke in pre-recorded speeches, and as we reported earlier, the president called out China over the coronavirus. Then he turned to his administration's accomplishments, such as the new peace deals in the Middle East, and predicting more will come shortly.
Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain all signed a historic peace agreement in the White House, with many other Middle Eastern countries to come. They are coming fast, and they know it's great for them, and it's great for the world.
And one of the countries possibly warming to Israel is the African nation of Sudan. After a 2019 military coup toppled a 30-year dictatorship, the Sudanese government is moving away from Islamic fundamentalism and towards democracy. While the turnaround is remarkable, some say it's too early to tell if the changes will last. CBN's Gary Lane brings us the story.
2 million people have died. Millions remain homeless. 3 decades of civil war and resisting Sharia law have ended, bringing new hope for the people of Sudan. For 30 years, CBN News has reported extensively in order to raise awareness of their plight. Our stories inspired American Christians to provide much-needed help. The people of South Sudan gained independence from the North in 2011, but the struggle continued for others, like the people of the Nuba Mountains. Christians in the north suffered imprisonment, and Islamists destroyed churches. A military coup brought change in 2019 with the removal of Omar el-Bashir. That brought change with a pledge to transition the country to democracy and free elections.
Enough is enough is what the people have been saying for a number of years, and finally they've had their way. I think the real challenge, though, is going to be if it sticks.
In late August, several rebel and political groups signed a peace agreement, ending the civil war and moving Sudan closer to democracy and freedom. The transitional government abolished the death penalty for apostates, those leaving Islam. Also, the government moved to separate the state from religion. That means Islam is no longer the basis of law in Sudan. The Voice of the Martyrs, Todd Nettleton, says Sudanese Christians feel they now have a window of opportunity for ministry.
Their attitude is, we don't know how long this window is going to stay open. So right now it's open. Let's go 100 miles an hour and minister and work on behalf of the kingdom of Christ. And so they see this as a real opportune moment for gospel work in Sudan.
Hardwired Global President Tina Ramirez is concerned about the prospects for lasting change. She says winning the war may be easier than winning the peace.
Even though Bashir is not there, the military rulers that held him in power for more than 3 decades are still there and are the ones negotiating this peace. And so the real proof is going to be in the next few years if it enters into the real permanent constitution after this transitional government.
The Trump administration is promising millions of dollars in investment and development to encourage the democratic shift. Before that can happen, however, Sudan must not be designated as a state sponsor of terror. The U.S. has brokered a deal that would drop Sudan from the terror list once it pays a $335 million settlement to victims of the 1998 attacks on the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. That deal is currently stalled in the U.S. Senate. Meanwhile, Nettleton says Christians need to keep praying for Sudan.
Our former Africa Regional Director, Peter Yasik, was imprisoned in Sudan for 14 months. Many people, because of his story, prayed for that country. And I wonder if some of what we're seeing now is the fruit of those prayers. We need to keep praying that this transition will go forward peacefully and that our Christian brothers and sisters, their rights will be respected under the ultimate new government of Sudan.
Gary Lane, CBN News.
Thanks, Gary, for that report. Well, turning down to the American South, where rains from the remnants of Tropical Storm Beta continue to drench Texas and Louisiana. The storm stalling out over southeast Texas, dropping at least 14 inches of rain so far and causing flash flooding in downtown Houston. The city's fire department rescued more than 60 people from their cars, joined by everyday Texans who saw a chance to serve.
I expect to have 100 or 200 plus vehicles recoveries today.
The storm is expected to linger throughout the day, dropping at least 8 more inches of rain on both Texas and Louisiana.
Well, if you want to be a part of a relief effort into Texas and into Louisiana, throughout the Gulf Coast, Operation Blessing is on the ground working, and if you want to be a part of it, give us a call. 1-800-700-7000.